Conclusion don't start, right? Activities to mark Nigeria's 63rd independence anniversary commence as Secretary to the Government of the Federation reaffirms President Tinubu's resolve to deliver good governance.
President Tinubu's administration in retrospect. Information Minister rails out successes.
National Assembly resumes today after 2023 annual recess.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall be discussing implementation of flood control recommendations.
All right, now flood is the most common and recurring type of natural disasters in Nigeria and across the globe, with increasing frequency, severity, and of course spread. The unfortunate incidents of flooding in Nigeria particularly have wreaked havoc on several communities in the country, while flooding impacts the country each year. The damage and losses from the 2012 and 2022 floods were enormous.
No question about that, Kirian. Now, the 2022 flooding across 34 states of the Federation took the country, as it were, by storm and displaced thousands of people, wreaking havoc on properties as well as farmlands, with unprecedented casualties of reaching well over 660 persons who died.
Yes, scores of people died, as my colleague said, and of course property worth billions of naira damaged, and perhaps for the first time in Nigeria's flood history, Nigerians witnessed coffins probably containing human remains exhumed from the places of burial by the ravaging flood, floating around their places of habitation, and of course towards reducing the risks and impacts of subsequent flood disasters and challenges on the citizenry. A presidential committee was set up as directed by former President Muhammadu Buhari and was inaugurated on the 3rd of November 2022 at the presidential villa to develop a comprehensive plan of action for preventing flood disasters in Nigeria within 90 days.
Now, the presidential committee developed the National Strategic Plan as directed, in line with the 6 terms of reference, amongst which were assess and review existing plans and policies on management of flood disasters in Nigeria, identify and work with critical stakeholders in flood disaster management, identify and visit selected strategic flood-affected and prone areas.
Now, what were the key recommendations by the committee in controlling flood in the country? Our panel of discussants will be focusing on this and other issues as they relate to flooding in Nigeria. I am Kirian Umaya, welcoming you to Good Morning Nigeria today.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Kirian to also welcome you to the program. As always, we are reaching you live from our headquarters studios in the nation's capital, Abuja. In the course of the program, we'll take the highlights of the morning news. That will be shortly. Thereafter, business news and newspaper review. Here now is our colleague, Frama Panyi, who has the morning news. Good morning, Frama.
Good morning, Kirian. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigerians. Here is the morning news. The federal government is anchoring reasons for this year's celebration on the commitment of Nigerian people to achieve uninterrupted democratic rule since 1999. At the World Conference to mark the 63rd independence anniversary of Nigeria, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, George Akume, reaffirmed the resolve of President Bola Tinubu's led administration to deliver good governance.
We are doing this celebration conscious of the fact that we are 63 years, but also, more importantly, conscious of the fact that economic times are hard.
The Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, is optimistic that Nigeria is on course to recovery and greatness due to the way President Bola Tinubu has hit the ground running. both at home with a series of bold and unprecedented reform decisions, and as well seizing the opportunity offered by the month of September 2023 to make a grand entry onto the global stage. The minister, who reviewed the president's journey so far in a write-up, also acknowledged the commitment, dedication and determination of cabinet members to implement the renewed hope agenda of the Tinubu administration.
Failures in good governance have hindered Africa, but broken promises, unfair treatment, and outright exploitation from abroad have also exerted a heavy toll on our ability to progress.
Meanwhile, the Senate and House of Representatives are set to resume plenary after the 2023 recess, and some legislators speak on their expectations.
Legislative agenda of the 10th Senate. Gender matter, revisiting the women participation in politics and political positions. Youth development.
And Senate will today, Tuesday, screen former chairman of the board of Citibank Nigeria, Dr. Olayemi Michael Cardoso, for the position of the governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN. The Senate will also screen 4 nominees for the position of CBN deputy governors who will join forces with Cardoso to steer affairs of the Apex Bank in the next 5 years. In a statement from the media office of the Senate leader, Senator Michael Opeyemi Bamidele, the Senate will screen all the nominees on resumption from its annual recess. The statement adds that Senate has scheduled to screen the ministerial nominees Dr. Jamila Bio Ibrahim and Mr. Ayodele Olawande, respectively designated as Minister of Youth and Minister of State for Youth on October 3, 2023, and on September 15th, President Tinubu approved the nomination of Cardoso to serve as the new governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Deputy Speaker, House of Representatives Benjamin Kalu has enjoined citizens of the Niger Delta region to embrace dialogue and peaceful advocacy in drawing government's attention to development challenges in the region. In an audience with a delegation of the Ukwa People's Consultative Council from Abia State, the Deputy Speaker gave assurances that the legislature will engage the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, to ensure equity in the spread of development projects and programs across the 9 states that make up the region.
Is to once again beam the light, the torchlight, on the oversight functions of the NDDC committee on NDC operations.
Minister of State Education Dr. Yusuf Tonko Sununu says the out-of-school children put at 10.6 million is unacceptable to the present administration, which is determined to tackle the menace. Dr. Sununu, who was speaking at the opening ceremony of the Basic Education Summit held in Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, notes that majority of Nigerian children are set to enjoy quality education.
Education has witnessed various improvement and tremendous development in recent times in our country and across all levels, and we must remain committed to continue to assiduously sustain this effort.
And the federal government has declared Wednesday, 27 September 2023, a public holiday in commemoration of Eid al-Mawlud, the birth of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Minister of Interior, Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo, who made the declaration in Abuja, congratulates all Muslim faithful both at home and in the diaspora for witnessing this year's celebration. In a statement by the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Interior, Dr. Oluwatoyin Akinlade, the minister's admonition to Nigerians to imbibe the spirit of love, patience, tolerance, and perseverance, which are deep spiritual virtues that the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, exemplified. Tunji Ojo wants Nigerians, especially the youth, to embrace the virtues of hard work and peaceful disposition to fellow humans, irrespective of religious belief, ideology, social class or ethnicity, and join hands with President Bola Tinubu's administration in its efforts to build a progressive and enviable nation that all citizens will be proud of. The minister wishes all Muslim faithful a joyous celebration. And that's the news for now. We'll take a short break. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Kieran.
All right, thank you for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria is partnering International Monetary Fund, IMF, to reduce the effect of climate change on economic policies and development in West African sub-region. Details of this and even more with Aleka Obanachi Ara on Business News.
To mitigate effects of climate change, African Training Institute is planning to equip 44 people from 6 African countries on building resilient economies that can withstand climate shocks and sustain development.
All countries have ambitious policies. The pace at which they are moving reflects a combination of factors, capacity, which is not the same everywhere, and also access to financing is very important to accelerate the implementation of climate policies in the region.
We also need global cooperation to support the transition to a low-carbon economy and build resilience in the most vulnerable countries. This requires financing and access to technology.
Human activities, according to experts, contribute to accelerated air and water pollution and equally degrade the environment. In another development, Nigeria has been advised to take advantage of the 3 billion potential economic gains that awaits Africa's digital economy by 2025, if they can key strategically into the region's digital economy, stressing that this has been prepared by the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, AFTA. Now let's take a look at Monday tradings on the floor of the exchange. Business News, Alika Obanachi Arua.
All right, thank you very much, Alika, for the business news package. Up next, newspaper review.
All right, and let's welcome Chukwudi Okolibuaja once more for a review of today's National Daily. Chukwudi,
how are you doing?
It's good to have you. I'm great. Good
morning.
Yeah.
I feel good. Good morning, Kingsley.
Good morning, Chukwudi. Good to see you.
Same here.
All right, let's begin by taking a look at the front page of the New Telegraph. And we'll take some stories below the nameplate. 63rd anniversary. Poor economy, reason for low-key celebration. That's according to the federal government. Declares tomorrow public holiday for Eid al-Maulud. Governorship polls. INEC holds mock accreditation in Bayelsa, Imo, and Kogi, October 14th. Tribunal affirms someone will lose victory, dismisses Jando's petition. Ayedatiwa, Ondo Assembly directs CJ to set up probe panel. Deputy Governor seeks court intervention. Customs intercepts 1.64 billion naira explosive device materials and others. Seizes armored bullion van without end-user certificate. Arrests 9 smugglers. And Senate screens nominees for Central Bank Governor and deputies today. Lalong secures detained NOTU members release. Enugu-Port Harcourt bridge collapses. PDP cries foul as fire guts section of Supreme Court Justice's chambers. Incident has nothing to do with presidential poll petition. PCA, that's President Court of Appeal, 39,526 cases pending before appeal court. That's to say nearly 40,000 appeal cases pending before appeal court. Federal government secretly negotiating with terrorists, Zamfara governor alleges. University confirms rescue of 13 abducted students and 3 others. And then Senate calls for immediate rescue of victims. Carry on.
All right, now time to turn to the Blueprint newspaper, the blueprint for this morning, from top to bottom. Guba, INEC conducts mock accreditation in Bayelsa, Imo, and Kogi states. It's on page 18. Federal government announces low-key 63rd independence celebration. That's captured fully on page 9. Diphtheria. Nigeria recorded 453 deaths, 7,202 cases, according to the federal government. It's on page 5. Appeal court at annual legal year. We got 813 petitions from party primaries, 1,209 for 98 tribunals. Appropriate living budget for judiciary, CJN tells National Assembly. Fabwemi cautions on threats to judges, fire guts Supreme Court. All that on page 5 and 6 of the Blueprint newspaper. Below the photo story, gunmen abduct Benue Commissioner, ex-Zaki Biam Council boss. It's on page 8. Sanwo-Olu floors PDP at tribunal on page 7. Customs intercepts 1.6 billion hard drugs, IED materials. It's on page 23. Edo Ondo saga. Renounce your global ambition or face the consequence of Basakete's Shaibu. To that, I heard that Tiwa runs to court over planned impeachment. My life is in danger. Ondo speaker cries out. All that on page 6. Now let's bring in Chukwudi for further analysis.
Yeah, thank you, Kirian. I am starting with INEC conducting mock accreditation, in Bayelsa, Imo, Kogi, ahead of the October 14, vote. Okay, the point is this. There is nothing wrong in taking action that would ensure that you have a reasonably hitch-free exercise. But Kirian and Kingsley, at this point, I feel that there are certain things that should not suggest we're perpetually at the kindergarten stage of life. We should have perfected some of these things, because if you look at it at the end of the day, you're expending resources, even for the mock accreditation. However minimal the funds are, there are still funds to be expended. So I want to hear things that tell me lucidly that every day takes us at least one step forward in life, I'm not criticizing them. We're just observing that some of the things we keep repeating in Africa are things that should belong, to the past. So I wish them luck about mock accreditation and all that. By now, we should have gone, we should be ready to do elections proper, with proper, preparation and all that. But it's okay. We don't know what problems they really have. Now, a non-government organization is alleging that only 10 states can account for federal government's 2 billion naira palliatives. I'm not going to study that further. I'm going to just say, when these kind of things get said, the news hounds should take it up. Because if you look at our country, what is wrong with us is that laws are not enforced. We say things, but we do not follow them through. Action does not take over from expression. That is actually where we get stuck. Nigeria can work. Nigeria has worked in so many instances. Nigeria still works in some instances. But Nigeria can work better if sincerity befriends our daily life. if a real desire to self-develop becomes what we are truly interested in. So anybody can try to play havoc with the palliatives. Don't be surprised that some people could set up a mini shop. Oh, you're laughing.
No, you're saying
some people, there was a lady we nicknamed Essential Commodities in Benin City in those days. Because she was diverting all the essential commodities the government was providing, you know, when the SAP thing was, you know, really biting hard and all that. And you say, where is the conscience of each individual that does this? But you'll be surprised that on Friday or Sunday, these people are usually in front of the, you know, in the pew there, visibly there, giving glory to God. Then you go back home to cheat your brother. Africa's problems are not insurmountable. What we need is sincerity. What we need is a conscience. What we need is enforcement of rules and regulations. The law can work, you know. So if the NGO is saying that only 10 states can actually account for the palliatives, let the news hounds go in, find out what the true situation is, and expose it. That's the job of the fourth estate of the realm. I'm talking about journalists. So they've given us something to chew on. I don't see anything bad in that. And now quickly, on the foreign scene, Mali, they are saying that they're going to shift elections by due to some unforeseen circumstances. I told you something about these boys in Kaki. We keep quarreling outside of the studio. We actually quarrel over certain things. You know? Yeah, no. I told you these military regimes are not to be trusted. They get in there, and the people, just because they are coming from preventable misery, a background of preventable misery, shout, "Oh, welcome, guys," and all that. Before 3 months, some of them start handing us fat contracts to their girlfriends.
In this country, you have postponed elections under civilian regime.
I didn't say you should bring it back to Nigeria.
No. This is Africa.
Yes.
This is Africa. And we have common political problem. We have common problems.
You agree with me about the African
when it comes to democracy,
element?
We share the similar issues when it comes to democracy in Africa. There are no two ways about it. What has not grown in Nigeria is a sit-tight government. That's what has not worked here. I will never work.
Oh, I'm very happy about that.
But elsewhere, it is working. That's why they create the avenue for these guys to strike. When you begin to eat with your family members, cousins, relations, and all of that, you are growing fat for several years, up to 30, 40, and somebody is looking at you. I'm not saying it's justified or justifiable.
It can never be justified.
Because exactly. And it's not easy to set a government. I wasn't surprised when I heard that.
Let the military stay in the barracks.
Exactly. And let the people who govern well, so the military will remove their eyes from them. That is what's going on in those small countries, where not many are even educated to make a point, and so on. So that is the point. What happens there cannot be resolved unless we go back to the very beginning and replan. You talked about people having bad mind, or so to speak. Let me put it in a simpler form. I saw something on social media yesterday. Whether it's correct or not, I don't know. But pictures, don't lie in some cases. That the man that we're talking about, the man at the center of the issue of kidney harvesting. I saw him preaching in a church. He said he's the pastor in a church. So the video was showing him
asking some people
preaching
to give him hallelujah
church as a pastor of that church. Meanwhile, you are in the business of harvesting. Whatever it is that is not been, it's an allegation, so to speak. But then he had patience and all of that. And it's clear that the patient in question was his patient. So what are we discussing?
Kirian,
it's part of
when
what
I
we do
was
in this country.
at the finishing school in Lagos, that was poised. One of the things we were warned about as lecturers there was avoid religion and tribe, also sex. These are very contentious issues. Otherwise, Kirian, if we take up the issue of religion in Nigeria, the hypocrisy that has, taken a big stride into it, religion, we won't live here. And so many people are not going to be happy about it.
I saw one other social stuff like that. And he said that those days in Aba, that they had more than, say, 5,000 industries, both foreign and local industries functioning. But today in Aba, we have 5,000 churches.
A pastor told me, Warrior, as a young reporter, religion, actually, mentioned a particular religion and said it was the greatest untapped industry. I ran away from him.
All right. So, gentlemen, very quickly, I don't want to get too much into the issue with Mali.
Yes.
But the explanation provided by the military had to do first with the census exercise that is ongoing, and that there is some French connection.
Yes.
You know they are having some bitter divorce, as it were, with France.
Bitter divorce.
So if you don't have a credible census exercise, that's also likely to impact on whatever else you're doing. So I think that's
that's the point.
Yes,
so that's
point.
So it's possible.
That's possible. I'm not seeking.
That's the point.
I'm not seeking to justify what I'm doing, but that's their business.
What is on ground.
I think it's my bias that is the problem here now.
The other one has to do with the kidney harvesting. There was a story yesterday as well that the husband of the lady whose kidney was harvested in Plateau was offered a 20 million naira shut-up money, if you like, bribe. 20 million. I said, no, I won't touch that money. So I think the matter is still unfolding. Yeah. What we have asked for is diligent prosecution of all who were involved and who had been involved in previous cases. But I want to quickly draw attention, and I had said this on Good Morning Nigeria some years past. 63rd Independence Anniversary, poor economy, reason for low-key celebration. How many of us, no matter the poverty level that some persons are having or the challenges in the economy, will tell our family members, particularly our children, oh, that because of the economy, we're not going to have a good Christmas and New Year celebration, or we're not going to have a good Salah celebration. How many? How many? I'm saying this because some of the building blocks of patriotism, attachment to fatherland, start with things like this. You and I will remember how, when we were in elementary school, during the military years, this was well, of course, before Naira and Kobo came, we were using pounds, shillings, and pence. You rehearsed for several days, and this was before the oil boom. You rehearsed for several days for the march past.
The march past.
It was a big show.
It was a big show.
Ones.
You go to the stadium, you rehearse, and then during the program, there will be rice. They will give you rice. It was as if you were well fed when you were young, the evidence will be there when you grow up. It wasn't as if you were hungry. They will give you ice cream. You know, this one with the stick, the ice cream stick. So
make me well.
There was one. There are all kinds of things. You know, the farm milk and so on and so forth. You never this atmosphere of celebration. Who came first during the march past and so on and so forth. Of course, before you go for the march past, you would have taken care of your wardrobe, washed your uniform, ironed it. You know, with this pressing hot iron.
It didn't matter if it was butter.
Yeah, it was butter sandals. You know, so you grew up with that. Now we keep telling our children, oh, low key, and then we retreat. Oh, it would not be a presidential parade at the villa. You have a lecture, and so on and so forth. We've done that repeatedly. And more essentially, you ask yourself, okay, this is what the federal government is doing. What is happening at the subnational levels? You know, sometimes people who came, it was the first time they were seeing Samuel Ogbemudia take the salute on the days while you were marching past.
Spectacular
you will see the various police commissioners there. It was John James who was in Benin. You will see all of them. So and when that happens, you get that feeling to say, oh, this belongs to us. There is a gentleman who comes here. It's Flag Foundation of Nigeria. Yes. You will hold your flag, green, white, green. So how are the children going to be mobilized on this occasion? What are the activities lined up for them? We cannot be saying low key, and we keep missing the opportunity.
You see, the regularity of low key became a problem for a newsreader on one radio station. And he ended up saying that the activities were going to be keyload. I'm not joking.
Okay, yeah, it's true.
I know you guys think
I think what Kingsley said, that is so germane, what I picked from what he said, is that consciousness of nation building imbued in our younger generation of
the
Nigerians.
place of the family.
Believing in your country from kindergarten. That's what you were talking about. I recall there was one social media stuff that was going around then. And I think it's from North Korea. A North Korean child. He was crying, lying on the bed, crying bitterly, you know. The moment he had national anthem, he stood up and stopped crying. And after the national anthem, he started crying again. So what does that tell you?
Patriotic zeal.
Exactly. That the child is less than 5 years. So that shows you that, look, you have to build this patriotism from kindergarten. You grow with it and you can die for your country. Today, let me ask you, how many Nigerians will be prepared to die for the country?
I didn't come here to make any confession.
No, why I'm saying that is that, you know, because of that lack of building, you know, I will not do that. I deliberately ask people such questions, you know, casually. And what I get in response is what is obvious, and so on. So it's all part of life.
Yeah. And then, when you have opportunities such as this, I'm sorry, I'm not making, I know that we're out of time for this part of review. There are national challenges that we are faced with. Why don't you frame activities around problem solving for children and younger ones to say, yeah, these are issues we are facing with our country. This is how we can resolve them. And then you give them these activities.
Something that keeps the eyes
I'm not
on
just
the
talking
green,
about
white,
essay,
yes.
and then you link it up to the nation. I don't know.
Or you do children parliament, you know, on the occasion like children parliament.
It doesn't have to be an expensive project.
All right, gentlemen.
You know?
You kill it.
Yes. We conclude this review this morning. Thank you. I hope you have enjoyed it as we have enjoyed presenting it to you. Let's say thank you again to Chukwudo Koliwaja.
Always a joy.
For being here. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Okay. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. That's a place to be on a morning like this. We'll take a short break now. We'll be back. All right, you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we're glad to have you still with us. Now, to set stage for our discussion segment, which is on implementing flood control recommendations, let's now take this background report put together by Joseph Osen.
Since 2012, flooding has continued to ravage communities in many parts of Nigeria. The effects are devastating, with lives lost, millions of persons displaced, with property including farmlands worth billions of naira destroyed. The National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, reported that not less than 34 states, including the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, were affected by last year's flooding, and more than 300 people lost their lives. This year, the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency has predicted 32 states and Abuja are in high danger of severe flooding. Some states have already witnessed flash flooding, even as many communities are still counting losses from the havoc wreaked by last year's flood disaster. Towards reducing the risks and impact of subsequent flood disasters on the citizenry, a presidential committee was set up in 2022 under the directive of the President to develop a comprehensive plan of action for preventing flood disasters in Nigeria. The committee, made up of the immediate past Minister of Water Resources spearheading, also had the former Ministers of Health, Agriculture and Rural Development, Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management, Environment, Works and Housing, and Transportation included. The plan focuses mainly on flood mitigation to prevent hazards from developing into disasters, or to reduce the effect of disasters when they occur. After robust synergy with critical stakeholders, the committee came up with key recommendations covering 5 specific areas. They are: first, administration and legislation; second, data management and flood early warning system; the third is structural solutions. This is to carry out flood mapping and biometric studies, rehabilitation of existing dams and reservoirs, river improvement work, and construct new dams, flood walls, and detention basins. Fourth has to do with nature-based solutions, including promoting and sustaining tree planting. And the fifth is public awareness and capacity building of stakeholders at all levels of government, including military and paramilitary, for effective flood management. Experts have blamed much of the flooding in Nigeria to intense rainfall and the country's failure to develop and maintain water control mechanisms, especially dams and waterways, to contain the rising water table. On Good Morning Nigeria, guests will extract a recommendation of the Presidential Committee as a tool to mitigating flooding in the country.
All right, and to, of course, do justice to this topic this morning, we have Professor Emmanuel Adanu, Director General, National Water Research Institute, and member, Presidential Committee on Flood. Sir, you're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
With us as well this morning is Engineer Clementine, Director General, Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, here in Abuja. So it's also a pleasure to have you as always.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
And Engineer Clem, Unze, I think you also were on the Presidential Committee on Flood Management, Flood Control and Management.
Yes, I was there. Professor Adano actually is the chairman.
Okay, of the Technical Committee.
Yes.
I imagine. All right. Now, from our Kaduna Network Center, we are being joined by Professor Alwal Farouk Abdul Salam. Professor Abdul Salam is a professor of applied climatology and meteorology. Prof, we're glad to have you on the program this morning. Okay, and then joining us via Zoom from South Africa is Engineer Tasiu Saad Gidari Wudil. He's President, Nigeria Society of Engineers. Engineer Tasiu Wudil, we're glad to have you this morning.
Good morning.
Gentlemen, our pleasure to have you with us. At least three of you are regular guests, particularly Engineer Clemenze and Professor Emmanuel Adano. Just before we get into the issues around implementing recommendations with respect to flood management in Nigeria, help our viewers understand what is happening around the world. Stories that we previously never heard. Commonplace. You saw what happened in Libya, for instance. No fewer than 5,000, some estimates saying 6,000 persons killed from, of course, impacts or consequence of flooding. In Beijing, that's the capital of China, flood is swept through various districts, parts of Europe and elsewhere on the African continent, and here with us, of course, in Nigeria. We've also seen some consequences of flood. A few persons have already lost their lives, even though there's no tally just yet as to what is happening. And some persons will say this is a warning sign as to what lies ahead if we don't act earlier. No, but just let our viewers have an understanding of what's playing now. Let's begin with Professor Emmanuel Adano.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Well, in most cases, I think we're all aware that the advocacy generally now is that climate change is responsible for most of this. And the climate change is basically temperature rise and sea level fluctuation. Now, temperature is rising. Over the past 100 years, we have an increase of about 0.7 degrees. And they want to maintain it, but it's not possible. So with temperature rise, evaporation increases, then water from the Arctic and the poles also get melted. Seas refuse to take water, and then rain falls. That's one. We have many other factors responsible. But what we sometimes forget is that while development keeps going on, you are paving the land, you are industrializing. So the amount of water seeping into the ground keeps reducing. Whether it's in the town or not, roads, general development removes the water that goes into the ground as recharge, then makes it an open water flow on the surface. This contributes heavily to the flow. Now, if you think you've controlled the drainage in the environment you live in, you are discharging that water to somewhere that nobody lives. And nobody is trying to control the drainage in that area. So you are adding more to the surface flow. So sometimes when you think you're well developed, you say Beijing and all this, the number of people building houses, the development generally all over the place will reduce the amount of infiltration to the ground. Now, one other aspect again is deforestation. When you cut trees, because people don't know how important trees are, they act like forests. They act as interceptors. Some rainfall falls on the leaves, get evaporated back, and then some will penetrate into the ground and when they get into the ground, most of them pass through the trunks of the trees, and they get directly into the ground through the roots, and they recharge the ground there. And the undergrowth keeps it a bit moist. In the dry season, it starts discharging this water for you as underground water. But when you deforestate, the same thing will happen. Nowhere to retain the water, water goes to the ground, and then erosion and all. Now, when erosion starts as well, all the valleys that you are not controlling in the bush all get silted. So when there's rain elsewhere, you start seeing the effect. And basically, about 30% of terrestrial rainfall that falls on ground, not in the ocean, do not show the attitude until somewhere else. So when it rains here, 30% of that rainfall will not show the behavior at all until somewhere else. So you'll be somewhere, you trying to till the land, devastate a lot of things on the land. You don't know. The effect may not be there, but eventually it will show. Yeah. So I think climate change, most of this, and our behavior too, we develop, and we'll keep developing, and we're paving the land. Like Abuja today, it will keep having flooding if we don't have proper drainage channels. Because when you pave the land, you also increase the overland flow.
Yeah, in fact, what I've just explained, accounts for what is happening elsewhere, where they have a good drainage, like in America, Beijing, my colleague mentioned, and then Libya. Libya, of course, had the issue of busting of a dam, 2 dams busted, and that created the havoc that has become catastrophic. There's over 6,000 people dead already, and about 10 missing in the first place. So there are people who they don't have record of them, whether they're alive or not, and so on. So them have been washed away. Well, only God knows better. Now, the issue of climate change, that will make me to bring in Awal Farouk Abdul Salam, Professor of Applied Climatology and Meteorology. Now, from what Dr. Adano explained, how do you link it with what's happening on the African continent with respect to flooding? We know that Europe have been flooded even this year, a number of them and the other countries we mentioned. Right now, in Nigeria, we had the 2012 experience. It repeated itself again after a couple of years. We are not actually, a major culprit when it comes to greenhouse gas emission. We are not culprits. But then climate change, as we know, can affect you even when we're not contributing to that. Now, explain to our viewers how Nigeria is connected to this world phenomenon known as climate change with respect to flooding in the country.
Good morning, Nigeria. Unfortunately, the globe lives in a blanket, one blanket called atmosphere. As you rightly mentioned, Nigeria is emitting less than 1% of the greenhouse gases or the carbon emission that brought about climate change. But again, unfortunately, we are situated by geography in an area that is a hotspot of climate change. This is in addition to our vulnerability, both social and economic vulnerability, weak infrastructure, weak response capacity. Put all this together, you will see that it's a recipe of disaster. Now, having said that, climate change is directly linked to the issue of flooding, because climate change is bringing about, based on the scientific reports, almost the 6th cycle of scientific reports, all reported that climate change is going to increase the magnitude and the occurrence and exacerbate the issue of what we call extreme events. Extreme events, flooding is one of the major elements of extreme events. And unfortunately, again, rainfall, which is induced flooding, when we talk to the aspect of climate and in respect to climate change, is one of the elements that is very difficult even to predict because of its nature. A lot of interplay before you have a rainfall. So the 2012 flooding, which caused havoc globally and in Nigeria, and also the 2022 flooding, which you also reported, was devastating, especially in the north central and the north west and even the northeast, is attributed by reputable researchers, is attributed to the issue of climate change. And again, let me not be a prophet of doom. All the reports, all the scientific reports, all the modelings are saying that we are going to see more of these extreme events in near and far future, because the climate has been committed to change, and the rainfall is coming in a very strange manner. We've seen, you gave example of what happened in Derna in Libya, which is also linked to rainfall. Yeah, of course, the two dams busted, but the busting was induced by excessive rainfall. Look at what's happening in the eastern, in Europe, as you made mention, and also in the eastern world, as well as Nigeria. So flooding unequivocally is linked to climate change, and we've already committed to atmosphere to the changing. Unfortunately, we are going to see more of these extreme events. And part of the report given by the committee, it was even bolded when I was reading it that unfortunately we can't control flooding. Yeah, by extension, we can control flooding to some extent, but we cannot, completely, remove it from our disaster, timetable, because this is a natural event. Of course, it can be manned, but mostly it's natural event induced by excessive rainfall. So, to cut it short, flooding is linked to climate change. Changing is happening. Extreme events are increasing, and unfortunately, we are part of the world that we are going to see more of these changes in both the near and far future.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Awal Abdulsalam. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Now, to the studios here, Engineer Clemens, DG NISA. It is said now that flood is the most common disaster in Nigeria, with increasing frequency, severity, and spread. This, of course, is taken from a summary of the report by the technical committee. How does one understand that, if one is not an expert, to say that flood is now Nigeria's most common disaster, natural disaster, with increasing frequency, severity, and spread?
Thank you, Kingsley. So how does one come to understand that flood constitutes greater part of disaster incidences in Nigeria? Why? That's why you have several bodies that have been making efforts to ensure that the citizens of Nigeria come to terms with the fact that flood issues have come to stay, and also to ensure the timely and accurate dissemination of information to the citizens. Now, as early as January this year, the Nigerian Meteorological Agency, NIMET, alerted the nation as to the amount of rainfall we are supposed to expect in the course of the year, city by city, the onset and cessation dates. And following that, also from the federal level, the Nigerian Hydrological Service Agency, on the 17th of February, informed the nation that this is what you are going to expect in the course of the year. And this information was properly disseminated to the other levels of government, the state and then local governments. And the efforts are being made also to ensure that this is cascaded down to the grassroots. We also have NEMA at the national level, federal level also, doing their own bit, all in the bid to ensure that people are properly informed. So what am I saying? All hands should be on deck, not only at national level to where all this information comes from, in terms of the timely release of the information to the people. We expect that the other sub-nationals should take part in enlightening their citizens. Like we always say, flood incidents occur at the community level. And where are these communities? They are in the local governments, they are in the states. And it's expected that once this information is received, it ought to be translated by the same people, by people in the various languages or dialects in the country to ensure that the message gets down. But most of the time, we discover that that collaboration is not given by the other sub-nationals. That it seems that what has been done at the federal level all the time, releasing information as early as possible, like as early as in January, in February, there was no single rains yet in Nigeria. So it's expected that necessary preparations should have been made from that time before the onset of rainy season and being established across the country as we have it today to avert the ugly consequences that have been coming on us year in, year out.
Okay, you see, because this is now a regular occurrence, the plans should be made. If we are thinking, all right, before we come to Danu to give us an insight into the committee's recommendations, Councillor, let's bring in the President of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, who is Engineer Tasiu Saad Udil, who is joining us from South Africa via Zoom. So you've listened to other guests, and the needless going back to what have already made us to know with respect to the origin of this natural disaster and its characteristics. Now, let's look at the issue of preparation here, because from what Dr. Nzo told us now, repeatedly on an annual basis, they reel out this information early enough for preparation. That's it. This is going to be the water movement in Nigeria. This is going to be the quantum of rainfall. They even go to the extent of cascading it down to the quantum that could get into communities across the states of Nigeria and specifying the number of local government areas that will get this water, surplus water, right? Yet, yes, it's a natural disaster. It may be beyond our control, but again, something can be done. And from the point of view of engineers in Nigeria, or Nigerian sort of engineers and other engineering bodies in the country, would there be a possibility of forming a kind of strategic planning to ensure that Nigerians in authority positions, especially in the subnational levels, will heed to the advice of agencies that give us information with regards to flooding in Nigeria?
Thank you, Karen. Yes, the issue of flooding has been a serious concern to the Nigerian engineers. In fact, I'm happy in the studio you have one of our resource persons in one of our programs, which we invited him to come and speak from the perspective of water experts. And we have Engineer Nze there with you. We tried by all means, right from the word go, right from 2012, we've been involved in so many research work, so many committees set up with a lot of experts from all walks of life. Engineers are involved, and we have made recommendations to governments over these periods, and it seems it is the political will that is lacking. And unless you have political will to implement those recommendations, I don't think we are going anywhere. The only thing is that individuals will try to move away from building on the floodplains so that when the water comes, it is inevitable that due to our action or inactions on the environment, the climate is changing. And that changing climate, you cannot control. And it leads into these floodings. And how do you do that? How do you mitigate the impact of this flooding? There are measures. Those reports have given them out. There are long-term, short-term, and medium-term solutions. And most of the solutions need political backing, needs the buy-in of the communities. The guests in the studio have mentioned them. We need everybody to be on deck. Every hands must be on deck to make sure that this menace is minimized. It is inevitable, it must be there, yes. But the impact can be minimized. And one of such impacts, long-term impacts, solutions, was the creation of the dams. You will ask the question, okay, the dams in Libya are broken. Yes, it's not only to build a dam, but even the management of the water is very important. When you need to spill, you spill. When you need to retain the water, you retain for your use. But mostly it's just like, okay, we have built the dam, it has solved the problem. No, you must operate it properly. There must be proper operation, and the management of the water should be known. But you know, there are sometimes they call it force majeure. Some of those things come, they are beyond your predictions, and they are beyond you, and there are human errors. So with that, I believe we'll be able to say, okay, bring back our reports. Let me use this medium to call on the government to please call back those reports and see what government can do. Not only federal government, state government, local governments, where those floodings happen. I happen to come from a riverine place. Wudil is a riverine area. We suffered flooding right before I was born. In fact, my grandmother used to tell me, you are born on the year there was flooding. And we keep getting these floodings. And I'm telling you today, people have gone back to those places and built houses. And government is not doing anything. And it's only when the water comes and washes everything, then we will start blaming ourselves. So,
Director, come. All right. Sorry about that. Engineer Wudil, sorry, your picture there was a bit unsteady, and I was just trying to get our engineers to advise you on what to do so that you have a more steady output from your video connection to us. Engineer Tasiu Wudil there, speaking to us via Zoom from South Africa. Now back to the studios. Gentlemen, let's now begin to get into the work of the Presidential Committee on Flood Management. Engineer Wudil was talking about the political will. There was a presumption that following the devastating floods of 2022, when the then President Muhammadu Buhari inaugurated the Presidential Committee, that yes, this was a demonstration of the will to deal with the broad ramifications with respect to flood management. The committee was headed by the then Minister of Water Resources, that's Engineer Suleiman Adamu. But happily, Professor Emmanuel Adanu, you were the chair of the technical committee. What do we know about the recommendations of that committee at this time?
What do you know? No, what do I know?
What do we? I'm not saying
including your humble self.
Well, thank you very much. Maybe I'll just give a small insight to the... Prior to our inauguration, there was a committee set up, and there was a document produced by the Ministry of Humanitarian then. It was basically for preparedness and response, emergency preparedness and response. It was approved by the Federal Reserve Council before our own was set up. But ours is to prevent flooding. But theirs is to respond to flooding. So there was nothing conflicting about them. So in the process of the development of our own report, we acknowledged that it existed. but it can only be activated when flood occurs. So it is put in our document as such. Ours was to prevent. But if you look through, because you can never prevent flooding, but the instruction given by the president is to produce a plan of action for prevention of, that was it. We didn't use the word prevention because we know technically, and as technical people, it would be naive for us to say we prevent flood. But we know we can reduce flood. So we use mitigation throughout. That's to say that we prevent the hazard from developing into disaster. So what are the steps to be taken to do that? And that's the way we actually captured and walked through. Now, first of all, we have to identify what causes the flooding, how many of these floodings we've had, and what are the levels of the flooding. So these were the issues we used to categorize our flooding. Incidentally, over the years, we got out a lot of information on the flooding, the kind of flooding, where they occur, the frequency, the magnitude. And the night, the flooding in Lokoja, the 2022, was getting too much. Our former minister, Suleiman, got a call, I think somebody from World Bank, and asked him to declare state of, or asked the president to declare state of emergency. So he approached us, the minister. Then I told him, sir, on what basis are you going to declare a state of emergency? We know it's devastating. Do you have the indices for you to pronounce state of emergency? Because in future, we must refer to such. At what level can a state declare or government declare a state of emergency on flooding? So he said, please go and find out. So I took it to the committee. We spent over a week or two to construct just one statement because we took everything into consideration. But basically, it is flood. So we say we're going to categorize this based on flood. And what kind of flood? So we got flooding, imminent flood, minor flood, moderate flood, big flood, and then devastating flood. And at what level of this flooding can you declare state of emergency? So we got that one out. At category 4, imminent flood is something that people may not believe. It's not flood yet. Today, this year, in this year, Labdo Dam was going to open, and they called us to say, we're going to open Labdo Dam. That's an imminent one. We knew if it was released when there was water, there's going to be flooding. But is it going to be devastating? Then minor flood. Minor flood is a flood that will come. It may just overflow the bank, but still be retained within the valley and can be used for economic purposes, for irrigation and this. Then a major flood or moderate flood can cause devastation, but within the capacity of the region to contain it. Then the point at which a state of emergency will be declared is when the flood will have loss of lives, destruction of structures, infrastructures, and also disruption, severe disruption of socio-economic activities beyond the control of the region, beyond the control capacity of the region. Then after that, any other flood that comes. So we now said, okay. Now when we looked at early warning, we have organizations providing early warning for us. NIMET, NISA, many others. Even environment, the Ministry of Environment has sophisticated equipment, but we didn't know. And they are not publishing the results of this to anybody. Sophisticated equipment. So we say, okay, all those who have this equipment or facilities to give us indication of the impending flood should bring. We didn't have that coordinated. Now, measures taken. If you look at the Water Resources Master Plan, almost everything is there about flooding and what to be done and what not to do. And physical structures that can reduce flooding or control or manage, they're all there. But we didn't have any organization or a forum that can take this on government level. So we said there should be a flood management council. That flood management council is going to do everything that has to do with flooding, should be headed by the vice president. Now, it couldn't have been president because president is already the chairman of the climate council. And this is that, so we believe that the office of the vice president can hold it. And that is the high level that all, well, ministries that stakeholders to water will be part of it. So we recommended that. And it's that council that can advise the president on the declaration of state of emergency. And that is a council also that can make funds available, generate funds, and take actions, any action at all that has to do with it. So most of anything you have to do about flooding should be submitted to that council. Not one, and members of the council are there, so many of them, so many, including the military. Okay. So we have all these things as recommendations. But then, physical and structural, that is so important because if you want to get to the physical structures to mitigate the effect of flooding, one is construction of probably dams. Engineer was talking about it. Yes, the construction of dams. Yeah, but when you construct a dam, what is the effect of it? So we say, okay, if you are going to use as your structural measure, physical, construction of structures such as dams, retention levees and others to protect and divert flood, who will benefit from it? It could be water resources, it could be health, it could be agri, could be power. So we say, okay, all these things should be under the vice president. He can direct ministries to make contributions to fund this. Now, the other one that is so important is who is going to be in charge of what in terms of the sectors, ministries. The overall boss is the vice president, but there are some other aspects that may not reach him, but some people can be in charge. Take, for instance, the military. We invited the military to come in, and they sent Air Force representative, Navy, and Army, and they were there throughout. Nice officers. Technical committee. Nice officers, and they contributed. But when they came, I asked them, what do you know about flood? You have rapid response or units, they call it, I think...
amphibious...
yes, units, you have them all over the country. Now, can you respond to flood when it occurs in your units? And they say no, which means they didn't have the training. So I say, okay, good. You notice that we're inviting you because you notice that when there's flash flood anywhere in the world, the people in the front line, mainly military, sandbags and all this, see that to reduce the flood, the quantity of flood flowing in one direction, retard it a bit and redirect. Those give people enough time to at least move. But we don't have that. So please, we are going to recommend that all these rapid response units or emergency response units of the military should have such, and people should be trained. And then from time to time, they will have drills. The environment, they will train them on what to do before, during, and after flood. So we incorporated that. And this is going to be done in the community areas, local communities, everywhere anyway, but among the people. So that is another one. Yeah. So we try to give responsibilities to those who we think can do certain things with discipline.
All right, sir. As a matter of fact, it's a very comprehensive packet from what we're saying in all perspectives. You touched all aspects of that because when you started, the nomenclature was going to be an issue, but you have clarified that yours is a flood prevention. There's also flood management, right? And what you have enumerated is clearly. It's an indication of what is lacking in the planning system of the country, especially at the subnational level. Because if you put the committee on the vice president, who is, of course, at the national level. And we all agree that flood could be more local than, than a city incident, because all that goes down to the communities where you have a greater number of Nigerians who suffer the catastrophic nature of flood devastation. So let me bring in again Dr. Farouk, Professor Farouk rather, Professor Farouk Abdul Salam once more. You listen to Professor Dr. Adanu enumerating what the committee articulated, having been commissioned to do that by the former administration of this country. Now, what would be your suggestion with respect to the implementation aspect of what you have just heard? It has, of course, itemized all the areas that they have specified and analyzed before presenting them to government. What, in your opinion, would the current administration do in terms of imbibing their ideology with respect to address the flood prevention issue?
Thank you for bringing me back again. Just like you made mention, if you look at the report, the strategies, as a person with passion for strategy, you can say it's a very comprehensive report, very good strategic plan. It's captured virtually whatever you're going to think, from stakeholders to religious leaders to. And then if you look at from strategy 1 to 10, which is like a cycle from data acquisition to early warning to management to, the protection of the environment, of the infrastructure, up to the most interesting one, because it's going to be all the benefits of flood, which, of course, there are a lot of benefits of flood. Even that one, the committee has captured it, and the recommendation, the 5 areas of recommendation. Very interesting. You see, flood is a very, very serious event. One of the major disasters based on NEMA report, and you can only understand the magnitude of flood only maybe if you can simulate or put yourself in the shoe of somebody that lost his home, lost his farmland, and it's not only about the loss, it comes with associated issues, a serious trauma, mental dislocation, and look at the number of loss. It's a very serious event. My worry is, I think the worry of most Nigerians, is the issue of the implementation. The committee has suggested or has recommended National Council Flood Management under the Office of the Vice President and under the supervisory supervision of the Federal Ministry of Water Resources. The issue is, my fear, like I say, is not to have another council of another agency among others. Because here the main theme is coordination and synergy. He had mentioned, the professor has made mention that there are sophisticated instrumentation, and NISA and NIMET have the capacity to do the forecasting, but very, short-term forecasting and long-term prediction. And we have ways to disseminate information. But the issue is, who will be responsible of coordinating these agencies and also implementing the recommendation? And again, floods sometimes happen without even serious warning. Of course, with all the early warning, we can say, yes, we can have. But when it happens, what is the capacity of response, the time of response, and also the coordinating all these agencies that and stakeholders that are about 10 or 11 to come and work together? I think the major issue here is coordination. And even if the council is going to be there, an agency, and specifically I think this should be NEMA, because they are the one in charge of emergencies. Only if they are going to be overwhelmed by the work, they should be responsible for coordinating all these agencies and implementing these strategies, which, if implemented to the fullest, definitely Nigerians will be will be happy. I can understand the anger, especially when I saw a report from Bayelsa in 2022, the anger of the residents. You can really understand that because no help is coming after this serious event. And link it to my own area, like I said, I have to mention it again. This is like a kind of, let's get serious again. This extreme events, especially flood, induced by excessive rain.
Prof, let's pause you in the meantime and come back to the studios with Engineer Clemuze, who also served on the technical committee. Earlier in his explanation, Professor Adano did say that there was a prior approval by the Federal Executive Council of a working document, a strategic document by the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, which incorporates NEMA, and that dealt with preparedness and response. That is when flood occurs. But that your committee then elaborated more, dealt with mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. So, which will be a much more, a broader way of looking at, if you like, the value chain, shall we say, of flood management in the country. Where, in your opinion, should we begin? I'm asking this question against the backdrop of our experience this year, because your committee finished your work, you submitted, and after that, we haven't heard anything. I mean, the last administration ended on the 29th of May. There were a few, if you like, disparate actions and motions here and there, but whether there was actual movement, by talking about the coordination that he referred to, what I would like you to see. What is it that the committee was recommending with respect to flood management, taking into cognizance those 4 areas: mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery?
Thank you so much. I think Professor Adano has really enumerated all the issues that are involved, and especially one of the recommendations of the committee, the establishment of the National Flood Management Council to be domiciled at the office of Vice President. Now, there are several stakeholders that are involved in flood issues, and the committee painstakingly, gave responsibilities to various stakeholders. One, like we rightly mentioned earlier, there are agencies of government that are the upstream sector when it comes to flood-related disaster in Nigeria by coming up early enough to give details of what is expected in the course of the year. So the issue of prediction is quite apt. The issue of dissemination, if you go through the details, the agencies that are ministries that are involved, so many, even Ministry of Information, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Water Resources, Ministry of Environment, Agriculture, Environment, Science and Technology, and so on and so forth. Each of these agencies or ministries are assigned responsibilities of what they need to do prior to. Now, the response when the disaster has occurred, we know that now it is NEMA. I think NEMA has gone back to the office to the presidency.
The Vice President's office.
Okay, yes, Vice President's office. No longer the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation also. Mm-hmm. So they know their work, they know their limits. So it is this council that coordinates all the activities, while each sector, as I enumerated earlier on, carries out its own responsibility to ensure that a holistic action is taken before time.
I'm not very clear. I think let's because sometimes I know that Professor Adano was elaborating on that mitigation, preparedness and response. Is preparedness, let's a layman's example. Preparedness like, all right, maybe you go and buy your mop, XYZ, buy your mop, buy your buckets, and then somebody turns on the tap, and then the response when the sitting room is flooded, somebody is mopping because you have already purchased all of those things. But the mitigation to say, look, how do you control the faucet? How is the work, for instance, of NEMA sufficient to take care of the entire flood management business as recommended by a committee? Prof, very quickly.
No.
Why?
You see, I was trying to say, when you talk about flood prevention, over the years, we know what NEMA does. All of us here. We know what they have been doing. Now, when we try to talk about flood mitigation, it's beyond the scope of NEMA. Because the structural controls are beyond the capacity of NEMA. We are not talking about response to flooding now.
Yes.
We are talking about preventing it completely, which is, I'm putting this because that was the directive given to us. Mitigating it. It's beyond the scope of NEMA. Let's not just be so emotional about it. Now, as they were saying, each ministry that had responsibilities, we gave them to them. It's okay. Who coordinates these responsibilities we have? It must come to a central, where a very strong directive can be given on actions to be taken. So, water resources, we control flood sometimes in our home by, dams and all that. But, you see, we also incorporated the operation of the dams because it's part of the schedule. When Labdo keeps sending this, they are doing the right thing. When the dam is getting threatened, you have to release, which is the normal thing. All our dams have that. And we have taken consideration on how a dam, because we believe that floods, most of our floods occur in the rainy season. You can have a flood that occurs in the dry season. Yes. No rainfall. When a dam is improperly operated, for instance, it can cause flood. So that also can be taken into, is that NEMA's work? You know?
So flooding can occur during the dry season?
Sure.
Following improper operation.
Improper operation, and it is there. In fact, there's a section, a specific section about it in our report.
All right, sir.
The flood that doesn't occur only in the rainy season.
Professor Danu, yes, you also you were director of dams when you were in the Ministry of Water Resources. Right? I hope time will allow us to get into that, because one, dam management is also an issue. We have a lot of dams in this country. I don't know how many that are functional. That may be also a topic for another day, but it's also part of control, which you mentioned. When that dam will be release water, will begin to get threatened down here. But I also want to believe that there are dams also designed to contain what Lado is going to release, before it gets into our streets and homes in the villages across Nigeria. All right, we will take a short break, but I had wanted to ask a question to Tasiu Saad Wudil. Maybe we'll do that when we come back from break. Stay with us. Yeah, we are glad that we still have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria today. Of course, we're looking at a committee's report in terms of how flood can be mitigated, either it's mitigated or managed or prepared for it or respond to that. They're all the same. Let me return Engineer Tasiu Saad Wudil, President, Nigerian Society of Engineers. You listen, we have a better picture from you now. I mean, you are very okay. All right, I hope the audio will be good as well. Now you listen to them. You see, Nigerians may begin to think that when it comes to issues that are simple or can be handled easily, they become complex all of a sudden because of certain things that come to be or come to play in trying to engineer a good process. For instance, flood prevention, flood management, mitigation, preparedness. Now we have committees, 2 committees. I recall those days, late Dora Akunyili headed one other committee on flood as well during her time. And today we're still talking about flood committees, flood council, and what have you. All trying to see how we can get something to address the issue of flood. For me, it's complex, but also simple, where you have synergy among agencies. In most cases, the agencies are territorial in nature. By the time you bring them together, some don't like what is going on. They go and start puncturing. They go and start, undermining, activities of a community set up to bring out an ideology that will enable us to achieve an objective. That continues to happen over and over again. Now we have agreed that flood is unpreventable, no matter how you do it. What you need to do is how you can mitigate. Now, when it happens, what happens next? Response. That's what happened in Libya. Before people could come to the rescue of others, it was late. And those that came, it was so unfortunate for those victims in Libya, before they could begin to get, rescue, because they're not prepared. It's a country that is already, torn into pieces. They're not, they're not cohesive, in terms of administration in that country. So it affected what happened. Now, if such a thing happens in Nigeria with that magnitude, God forbid, we are not prepared for it. That is what it is. And in your opinion as an engineer, how do we engineer this process of mitigation, preparedness, and all that? How do we stamp out this issue of not collaborating among ourselves, agency-wise, and even individuals?
Yes, thank you so much. As you rightly said, there is no one single body to coordinate as it is now. And the committee's recommendations are apt. And we believe we are part of that recommendation. We are part of the technical committee. We are fully involved. And it is our own position for government that you set up this council to be able to do the coordination. You will agree with me that the different agencies have their own mandates, and they would usually act in accordance with their mandate. But there must be coordination for the impact to be felt. So that coordination is lacking. And we call on government to quickly set in motion. Whatever they will call it, they can change the concept. But let there be a strong coordination where it is command and control, where every agency will report, will take directives from based on their own plans, on what their mandate says. So that we'll be able, when we're prepared, when anything like Libya happens, we can easily do that. But as you said, flood cannot be stopped, but they can be mitigated. The impacts can be mitigated. And it involves so many other agencies. In fact, the citizenry, everybody is involved. That when you are asked to evacuate a place, you evacuate. When you are asked to do, not to throw rubbish into the waterways, you don't do that. But we also notice that human activities help in this flooding. When the waterways, when the drainages are built, but they are misused, we have people who turn the drainages into their dumping grounds, and you can't stop them. You won't know when they will do it. They come in the middle of the night, dump their rubbish from their houses into the floods in the cities and in the villages. So those ones help cumulatively to create those lesser troublesome flooding. But with those ones coming together, you see a major flooding. Likewise, in the management of the dams, as I said earlier, and Professor Adano has mentioned it, that is one thing to build the dam, to conceive such measures, to build it, but operating it properly is very, very important. Today, we have two dams on River Niger. And the flooding from River Niger is not as much as the flooding from River Benue.
Okay, Engineer Wudio, thank you very much. Let's come back to the chairman of the technical committee, Professor Emmanuel Adanu. I know there are certain things we can't get into with the way government functions, but you did your work and then had your strategic flood management plan, incorporating the recommendation for a flood management council, the setting up of a flood control fund, or something of that nature. But what happened before the last administration left on the 29th of May? And are these recommendations live before the current administration? I'm asking these questions because amongst the recommendations, you talked about structural and non-structural steps to be taken in flood management in the country.
Yeah, thank you very much. Before I get to answer that question, please, for the listeners, please sympathize with us. We didn't just come out with a document that didn't have contributions from all the stakeholders. We invited, if you read the forward to the whole document, we made a statement that this document is a living document. It's not a thesis, and it's not giving direct instructions to anybody. It is a document that can be reviewed with experiences in flood in future. You can add on to it. And it is also not intended to relieve anybody of his responsibility to pay attention to his environment. It is stated clearly there. So anybody who is reading this document should take into consideration that we worked hard to produce the document. It is not that we are emotional about anything, because we are different professionals that came together. Now, as for the reaction to the, we submitted our report. We were given 90 days, and we met the 90 days, submitted our report. On the 24th of May this year, the former president approved all the recommendations, the total report and all the recommendations. And the letter was sent to us. Now, it was almost late for them to take any action. 24th of May. But this year, not this year, this administration, we had already reminded them of this, written several letters, and all that. But we also believe that the administration was just coming. There was no way they had not had any time to look at it. So we're still waiting to see what will happen. But we have reminded them. And I think the process is on.
Okay, now let's bring in engineer Nza once more. I don't want to take you off your line in terms of your profession, but I want to see how far your agency could go in terms of issue of disseminating information on the early warnings that you normally do on an annual basis, which is very significant because you normally do a press conference, you speak to the entire press and people know, so there are no two ways about that. But again, in terms of pressing for this to be, adhered to, do you go the extra mile, to engage subnationals, for instance, to say, because I want to believe that your office has, sub-offices around the country, to say, look, people could have closer or have established a closer relationship with people in government, especially agencies of state that has to do with water-related agencies or climate-related agencies, to say, look, let's work in synergy, for you to permeate the system, to say, look, what we're doing is just merely to announce that we're going to have so water movement and so heavy rainfall and what have you. But it can also begin to address certain issues that are consequences of what is coming. Is there any way for you to press for that, or your own is limited to just normal information that you release on an annual basis? Could you go beyond that?
Okay, thank you so much. The Nigeria Hydrological Service Agency, we have offices in different parts of the country. Actually, in hydrology, Nigeria is divided into, that's scientifically, naturally, into 8 hydrological areas. And we have offices or office in each of the areas in the country. And they have their own coverages here and there. Apart from the advocacy, which actually is our work, after acquisition of the data and processing it to come up with flood issues in this particular regard, it is disseminated. And our staff in different zones work seriously with relevant agencies in the states they cover. Participate in whatever NEMA zonal offices are doing in their own locations. You have in Kaduna, in Ibadan, Enugu, Port Harcourt, Maiduguri, Yola, and so on and so forth. So we are not just disseminating information and we go and sleep. We participate actively with other agencies of government at the subnational levels to disseminate whatever we have done.
I'm not pursuing you here, because when you release the information and you say now you go further to do that, which is appreciable. Now, when I see other countries, so we are talking about preparations, ever before the rain start coming, I see them doing sandbags, and they do some, demarcations, blockades, deliberate ones. I mean, you see it being done. It's not just, it's being done before ever, when it's closed, because there's this monitoring system which you have. What you have, the process that you have has been giving Nigeria accurate information, and whenever you predict it happens. So that means you're accurate. In terms of now the closeness of the rain coming, who tells who? Now it's time to do some bagging. We don't know the water movement. We don't know where it's going to go. So why not start doing that? That doesn't happen. That is what I'm worried, that with the information, with the closeness, yet no activity, because it has to be physical. It's not a question of processing or deliberating or the discussion or conferences and what have you, or committee. It's a practical thing.
Yes. To some extent, that has been the missing link. That after disseminating the information as early as possible before the onset of rainy season in Nigeria, we find out that from time to time, most of the sub-nationals are not keen into what has been said, but I can give some examples of states or locations that we see action. In the FCT here, the government of the FCT and the administration of the FCT, now we have FEMA, FCT Management Agency, goes to the grassroots. You see the issue of the setting of river channels in the FCT, in the communities, train up people who are to work out in their locations whenever any emergency occurs. I'm aware of what is happening in Jigawa. The issue of clearing the drainages. They procure a lot of equipment, amphibious one that can work on ground and on water. Clear the taifa grass and the construction of canals, sandbags, building embankment structures along the river channels to ensure that flood issues will be minimized in the course of the year. So I'm aware of what's happening in Akwa Ibom. But by and large, the response has not been quite appreciable compared to the information that goes out as early as possible.
Which is why, Engineer Nze, I think just looking at the recommendations of the technical committee, there is a proposal, and you said the former president approved this, for the establishment of flood management committees at the state level. Now, we know the way, people will tell you about federalism and so on and so forth. What would be your advice, for instance, to the subnationals with regard to this document on the slew of recommendations that the former president already approved? Because they are also integral to the implementation, but they say that there are rules assigned, non-structural rules assigned to these entities. What would you like to see? So that as you are working at the federal level, or at the federal level is activating its own and implementing its recommendations, we are seeing commensurate work at the subnational levels. Prof, very quickly.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. The recommendation you're talking about, the council were discussing or we proposed. State governments are part of it. Okay. So when they take instructions from the federal government, the office of the vice president, they also act. So at their level, they can get this information and try to have a miniaturized management at that level. Now, if I can take you to Jigawa, he mentioned Jigawa. Of recent, Jigawa has been in trouble with flooding. Do we know why? of recent, we've been having excessive flooding in Jigawa. Yeah. Thank you. That's something we also try to find out. Now, that zone, from Maiduguri down all the way like that, down to the south, that zone, it's a zone that has about 197 dams. All of them are exposed to the atmosphere, you know, dams, the lakes. So there is continuous evaporation, whether rainy season, dry season, or cold weather, or hot weather, continuous evaporation. So the environment there is more relatively saturated with water than other environments. So when the rainfall trade wind comes from the southwest, it strikes it. The energy is too small to contain all that, to drop. So in most cases, that area now is like an atmospheric river that's just moving. So this rainfall will keep, as long as the temperature is increasing, the evaporation keeps increasing. So at that level, Jigawa can manage their own based on this kind of information they have. But the federal can also instruct them. Please take into consideration these anomalies we are having. You know? So how about this discrete? Different places in Nigeria have different kinds of flooding. NASA will tell you, the first early warning that any hydrologist in Nigeria should know is our drainage pattern. The drainage pattern shows that there are places that will be flooded any time in the rainy season, all the year round. Every time there is rainfall, these are areas. But the dynamics of the variation in rainfall is the one that causes most of this. So each state that is involved should also know the peculiarities of its drainage pattern. And this central body can direct them, knowing this. But we still need to do a lot of research into this.
Okay. Well, as a matter of fact, in some states, of course, you don't talk about good drainage system. It's what you get. And, of course, it's not helping matters here. As we are about to round off this program, let me bring in Awa Farouk Abdul Salam, Professor of Applied Climatology. You listened to the other guests, though, at this very late hour that we're rounding off the program. And I'd like to also share your views with respect to what can be done for synergy to be created so that Nigerians in different agencies can work together when we have issues like this. Of course, I agree it's a natural phenomenon. There are no two ways about it. You cannot get away from it. You cannot even prevent it. You can only mitigate it. Right. And what we're saying is that not much action is taken when early warnings come from reputable agencies of government. It has happened over the years. Now, we know that flooding comes every year. So what can we do to see, to ramp up our activities in this direction? Just in a few seconds, if you will.
Thank you. Like I made mention before, to achieve what the document recommends is to have a coordination between relevant agencies and coordination with subnational governments. And if there is this synergy, if there is this coordination, I'm sure we will see a lot of improvement in terms of flood management in the country. Also, the issue of enlightenment is very key for people to get aware about this disaster, and for policies, especially at the state government, to make sure that people are not allowed to build in a flood plains, areas that are known to be flood plains. And the entire issue of the flood management is capital intensive. I'm very happy with the component of the recommendation whereby the committee made mention of sources of funding. We should make sure that the legislative part of the government is very, very much aware about this, flood management issue and make appropriation for it, and also have a coordinated body that will even access. Part of the recommendation is to access aids and donation, With all this in place, I'm sure we can have some respite in terms of flood management in the country, which has become an annual occurrence and deadly.
All right. Professor Alwalu, thank you very much. That last point, Kirian, that Professor Alwalu was raising with regard to the recommendation by the committee for a flood management fund, it says it's a sweet one. And I mean, anybody who reads that will be delighted. But the committee also touched, I believe, tangentially on ecological fund. And you know, ecological fund has been not too clear, very fairly opaque, and sometimes, yeah. And so if we are looking for funding for flood management, what is probably more ecological now than flood? So you can have direct access from ecological fund to start off with the flood management control, instead of all these yearly rituals of crying about flood disasters and losses and so on and so forth. So let's utilize our ecological fund. A few persons have been jailed for that, and I'm sure you are familiar with those cases. Unfortunately. All right, on which note, we would like to thank all our 4 guests who have been with us on this very interesting conversation on the implementation of recommendations for flood management in Nigeria against the backdrop of what has been happening in recent years, not only to us, but also elsewhere around the world. Engineer Tasiu Saad Gidari Wudi, President of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, joined us via Zoom from South Africa. We appreciate your participation in the conversation. From our Kaduna network, we haven't been to Kano for a while, though, that reminds me. From our Kaduna network studios, Alwal Farouk Abdusalam, Professor of Applied Climatology and Meteorology, we appreciate your contributions to this conversation. Thank you very much indeed. Engineer Clement Nze, regular on Good Morning Nigeria, is Director General, Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, NISA, and a member of the Technical Committee of the Presidential Committee on Flood. Thank you very much for being here as well. Thank you. And another regular, Professor Emmanuel Adano, Director General, National Water Research Institute, and he was the chairman of the Technical Committee of the Presidential Committee on Flood. Professor Adano, thank you very much for your insights, and best of luck in getting the recommendations implemented following the earlier approval given by the former president. That's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. Tomorrow is another day. It's a public holiday, but we are here. Same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley Sadalo.
And I'm Kirian. You might do have a great day.